Hello, everybody. This is Audrey Kidwell at Volunteer Florida. We are going to begin the webinar in just a second, and this webinar will be recorded and sent out to everyone afterwards. During the call, the webinar, everyone will be muted to avoid any background noise. So if you have any questions or if you can't hear or the slides look funny, please use the chat box, and I can answer you that way. And then there will be some areas with an interactive session or a questioning answering where we will unmute everybody. And so if you are in an area with lots of background noise, please self-mute yourself. Okay. So welcome everybody to the Volunteer Generation Fund Volunteer Management Webinar Series. Again, I am Audrey Kidwell. I'm the Volunteer Generation Fund Program Manager. And I am here with Kat Keene, the Director of National Service.
Hi everyone, welcome to our first Volunteer Generation Fund webinar. And thanks to Audrey and team for putting this together.
Yeah, and so many of you on the call are Volunteer Generation Fund grantees, but I do see a few AmeriCorps and Rural Community Asset Fund, or RCAF, grantees as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us. So really quick, I kind of just wanted to remind everyone of these 8 volunteer management practices. I've listed them here on the screen. VGF and RCAF grantees are probably very familiar with these, as organizations had to opt in to a few of these practices during the application process. These are 8 steps or functions for effectively managing volunteers. And here at Volunteer Florida, we hope that grantees are using these as a guideline to effectively engage and track their skills-based volunteers and increase organizational volunteer practices. The webinar series is going to cover a variety of one of these 8 practices, and so we'll probably do bi-monthly. And if you're interested to read more about how they came up with these 8 practices or some more of the behind-the-scenes stuff, it comes from the resource Volunteering Reinvented, which you can find on the CNCF website or by doing a quick search for it. And so I'm going to turn over the webinar to Kim Bergs, the Volunteer Center Manager at United Way of Lee, Hendry, Glades, and Okeechobee. And she is going to be talking today about volunteer retention and recognition strategies and how to create a formula for success. So Kim, I will turn it over to you.
Well, good afternoon and hello everybody. Are you hearing me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. So Audrey, I understand you're going to be controlling the slides, and thank you everybody for being on the call today. So if you'll go ahead and advance, that'd be great. All right, so what I'd like everybody on the call to think about, and in a second Audrey may unmute you so that you can join in, but I'd like you to think about a rewarding personal volunteer experience that you've had in your life, whether you were as a young person or maybe in college, high school. Everybody think about that for a minute. And if anybody wants to chime in and explain to us why that was rewarding, we'd like to hear from you. Anybody? I'm happy to share my experience. Mine was rewarding because my father made sure that my brother and I had the tools to volunteer, and that we were thanked by many people just for coming to volunteer. Does anybody else have one they want to share?
Yeah, and everybody is unmuted, so unless you've self-muted.
Okay. I don't hear anybody except you guys. So.
This is Mary Matthews, so I'll just chime in because I just love to talk about my wonderful volunteer experiences. The first time I ever volunteered was for the Jerry Lewis Telethon, and it was as a child, and what a reward that was, because I went around and collected money from all the neighbors, got to take it down to the television station and get thanked. So that was very rewarding. And that's, I think, why we all just continue to do volunteering, because we're helping others and it builds our self-esteem.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that. Somebody else?
Hi, I'm Lauren Wolf with UMCM Suncoast. One of my most rewarding volunteer experiences was partly an educational one. I got to learn about different cultures and other ways of thinking that I had not been exposed to before. And just getting that experience of learning was very meaningful to me.
Awesome. Learn and grow. Anybody else? That was great, Lauren. Thank you.
We have in the chat box, Lori said that she did the same. She had a lemonade stand for MDA.
Nice. Awesome. Well, it's good to have that memory, and it's a great talking point to get the ball rolling with your volunteers, is to take them down memory lane and have them personally recite why they had a great experience. It's a great way to model. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. I would wager to say that most of you have had long-term dedicated volunteers, but have you ever wondered why volunteers stop coming? These are a few common reasons that have surfaced here through our office and some of our agencies that we work with. So I think you'll all agree that you've encountered this volunteer from one time or another, but volunteers feel their skills and time were not well utilized. Poor volunteer management. I can say I personally experienced this about a year ago with one of our agencies. The director got everybody started. She left and never came back. And I ended up staying for the duration of that project and just kind of finished it out on behalf of the agency. Very disappointing, but critical volunteer management piece that was missed. We also know that many volunteers are underutilized, or they've been involved with poor placement.
Oh.
Hello, I don't know where you went. I dialed back in, Audrey.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I really have no idea what happened there. I haven't touched a thing, so let's just roll on, and I apologize, and let's just go ahead with the next slide then.
Okay.
So I don't know if anybody's ever seen a volunteer Bill of Rights, but I thought this was a good strategy when you think about retention of volunteers. And this one I got from a Hope Hospice in southern Georgia, and I'll cite that reference later. But when you think about keeping volunteers around, look at this Bill of Rights that that might fit in well with your organization. As a volunteer, I have the right to be treated as a member of a team and not just free help. I think it starts with staff training. If you annually, at minimum, conduct staff training about how volunteers are being utilized at your organization, I think you're less likely to have any feedback from the volunteers as far as how they're being treated as a member of your team. As a volunteer, I have the right to a work environment that's safe and comfortable. I think that's pretty much sums that up. And to be given as complete information as possible about the organization for which I'm helping. In other words, we hope you're just not sending the volunteers with a brochure explaining your program and let them pick it up from there. So it's good to, you know, incorporate in your orientation so many ways for them to find out how they're specifically helping your organization, but also how they can share what you do with others. So next slide, please. To be given adequate and appropriate training to enable me to meet my responsibilities with confidence and skill. Again, another key point there is if depending on the supplies that you're using, depending on what you want the volunteer to gain, it's imperative that you spend the time to show them what you want to do. Not all of us are audio learners. Most people are visual learners, so you may have to put a prop or an example or something on the table or at the workstation so that they can look back to it and see exactly what you're trying to accomplish with them. As a volunteer, I should be given an assignment that takes into consideration my personal preferences, life experiences, education, vocational background, and offers me the opportunity for continued growth and development. I ask you if you are including your volunteers in service training. perhaps even a staff training session that might be pertinent to them. And the best example I could give would be the Red Cross, where they're very cross-trained in making sure that their volunteers all have CPR and first aid training. Here at United Way, we do some staff training and CPR as well, and we always invite our volunteers to join us for that training. I would hope that you're using a volunteer application of some sort, and on that application, you might ask them to list the skills that they have, but I encourage you to not weigh heavily on that, because just of their skill base, it might not be something they're actually interested in doing. You may find that somebody has retired out of their financial career, and the last thing they want to do is help someone develop a personal budget or do taxes or anything like that. You might find that their interest area is something that they really, really want to do as a volunteer. Next slide, please. As a volunteer, I have the right to be given a variety of learning experiences and the opportunity for continuing education. Do you invite them to seminars? Do you share different workshops? Some of you are probably familiar with Dovia organization in your community. That's a great place to encourage volunteers to attend. For many volunteers, there's just not a resource out there for them to get the continuing education, maybe not through your organization, but inviting them to participate in other workshops is really special, and I think it speaks volumes for them personally to make some gains. The next one is to be given sound guidance and direction by a caring, informed, and thoughtful person who will listen and hear my concerns and provide me with support as needed. And that might not be you. That might be someone else from your organization. Here at our United Way, we make sure that if our department is vacated for any reason, there's someone that volunteer knows they can go to, and vice versa, asking another staff member to just step in and check on them. We like to keep, our motto is keep them close. We don't want to put them in a big conference room and say, here, get this done, and we'll check on you, because I think that falls on deaf ears. And I think in many cases, the volunteer just feels like they're out there on their own. So consider that when you're supervising your volunteers. And on the last one on that page is, I have the right to have my contributions to the team recognized through day-to-day expressions and appreciation and promotions and awards. So they do have a right. Volunteers want to be recognized, even if it's, you know, a daily hello, a friendly smile. You know, if you know the volunteer likes, you know, a special coffee or a diet soda, just sometimes putting that special snack out for them really speaks volumes as to you're paying attention every day to what they're doing, and how much you appreciate them. Following up with an email, a phone call, a text message, just to let them know, hey, thanks for coming in today or yesterday. You can even have other volunteers do something like that, checking in on them. We have an agency who has a volunteer that unfortunately doesn't drive anymore, and she calls volunteers on their birthday and sings happy birthday to them. So something little like that is special, especially for your long-term volunteers, so that you can keep them engaged and keep them excited and wanting to come back. So that was from something I found on the internet. We have something similar, but I really, really like the way this one was worded. So I wanted to share that with you today. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so let's take a look at, you know, why volunteers are leaving, and how can we keep them around. So we here formulated some real basic steps as to reduce that turnover rate by creating a positive environment, by providing structure, by treating volunteers well, volunteer role rotation in case they get tired, you know, doing the same thing over and over and over. So cross-train them. Get them involved in maybe something else, another aspect of your organization, maybe sharing them with another agency, you know, to keep them motivated. Make sure their work is personally rewarding. I think every volunteer likes to walk away and say, wow, look what I did today. and look how that helps somebody else. So keep your volunteers motivated, enhance their skills, and afford volunteers training and guidance. Mentioned that a little earlier, but I think that is a really, really critical piece that you just have to pay attention. You know, as we say here, keep your finger on the pulse. Know what they're doing, sense that they're in your building. We send around an email here, building-wide, if we have volunteers in our building, and that sends a signal to the rest of our team to simply, on your way to the restroom or the kitchen or somewhere, pass by our office and say, hi, thanks for coming in today. You'd be surprised how many miles you get out of just another staff member stopping by to say thanks for coming in. Really, really appreciate that. All right, next slide, please. So some of you may know who Mary Kay is. I don't personally use any of her products, but I thought this quote was kind of pertinent. It says, everyone has an invisible sign hanging from their neck saying, make me feel important. Never forget this message when working with people. So think about that and maybe reflect on how it pertains to your volunteers. Maybe even cut out part of that, stick it up on your desk somewhere for a while. Maybe even offer it to your other teammates so that you know, everybody wants to feel like they're important. So again, it's the little things that mean a lot. All right, any questions before we move on? Any questions, or let's get some comments from people on maybe retention strategies that you're using in your programs? Not recognition, but retention. What do you have going on in your agencies or your programs that works to keep people on board? Let's share that.
And everyone is unmuted at this time.
Okay. All right, I'm waiting. Jump in anytime. What strategies do you use to keep them around? All right, I'm looking for Mary or Lauren. You rang in earlier. Can I hear from you again?
Mary Matthews wrote in the chat box that making sure that she stays in contact with the volunteers.
Any special tips that she has for keeping in touch with them?
Hi. Well, I have a database with all our volunteers and their contact information, so I need to speak with them to find out how their experience is going. So it's staying in contact via email is my best tip.
I've heard sometimes that volunteers feel like their mailbox is being blown up. Do you have a strategy or a certain tip that you could offer when sending out email blasts or individual emails? Is there good timing?
As far as individual messages, I do use email because it's very hard to talk to somebody on the phone and you don't want to disturb them. So even though people don't like to get bombarded with emails, I put a subject line on there so they know that who it is and why I'm contacting them, and I give them just touching base about progress, and they know what's expected. That because at the beginning when you give them orientation, you say they may be working out in the field, not in your office. So if they're working out in the field, then you have to maintain contact with a site coordinator wherever they are, as well as the volunteer, to make sure it's working on both ends. So if you can't physically get out and do it, you have to use your best means to reach them.
Awesome. That's a great point.
And then we have a few,
because not all of them are in our offices or our agencies. They're out in the field, and there's that little bit of disconnect. So I think using email for that touch base or keeping your finger on the pulse, great technique, Mary. Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, we had a few people who inserted through the chat box. And so someone says to empower volunteers, give them the give them a chance to excel and use their skills to enhance themselves in the organization. Someone else mentioned that they send out birthday cards and other thank yous to their mentors. And then someone else mentioned that they do try to showcase their volunteers on social media sites, especially when it comes to service learning experiences.
Awesome. And that can create another volunteer for opportunity for someone else to help you with those tasks. Sending somebody out in the field to do a surprise visit with maybe a flower or a bottle of water, just to say, just to go out and do those visits for you. I think those are great touches. But yeah, we can't lose them. But those are great. Anybody else have anything else show up?
Nope, that's it for the chat box.
Awesome. Thank you, Audrey. All right, let's move forward and look at some recognition strategies. And then I'm sure this is going to be, entertaining, because I am looking forward to some of the, the methods that you use too. So next slide, please. All right. So we came up with basically two types of recognition: informal, formal. They're kind of self-explanatory, but this list could just go on and on and on. And if we were in an interactive workshop, this is where I would call out, and we would come up with some brainstorming ideas. Just saying thank you. Things that the day-to-day interchange, whether it's email, whether it's a high five, whether it's a text message, little thank you notes. And these are great. We often have little kids make, we're doing them for the letter carrier drive right now. We have young children in our pre-K programs, our after-school programs are already making thank you letters to go out to the letter carriers and the volunteers for the May 13th event. And we give those to the folks on their vehicles that morning. So when they come out to start their day delivering the mail, or the volunteer driver is going out to pick up food, they get to take this little thank you note with them up front. We tell them to put it up on their dashboard and remind them that every can of food that they pick up is going to feed somebody in their community, and it's a great way to communicate. We just like using other people to do those thank you notes. It's very effective. Name tags. Why do I have name tags in there? Because we think we have a couple agencies here that use very generic name tags that just say volunteer on it, which is great. I think sometimes you have to identify yourself as being on the property or working in the field. I went into an agency one day a couple years ago. I could not tell the difference between the volunteers and the staff that worked there. And if I'm a stakeholder in that organization, I'd like to think that maybe I'm seeing more volunteers than staff from time to time. So what this agency does now is they have name tags, and then as the person moves up through years of service, their name tag changes. So it sometimes goes from paper to a white background to a blue background, and that kind of indicates their years of service. And they're given that name tag at their annual banquet. So they are recognized standing up and receiving that new name tag. It has become very, very popular. They also carry business cards, and you can make your own business cards. They make generic cards that just say the name of the agency, the website. There's a line on that business card where they can print in their name. So as they're out in the community, they happen to talk to somebody about the agency they're volunteering with, they can give that person that business card, and some of them even put their own personal phone number on it. Hey, call me, ask me about how you can help. Or they give the name and number or contact information for the volunteer coordinator at that agency. And as we know, there are many, many ways that you can make and print your own business cards. We think it's a pretty cool technique. Name tags and business cards. Believe it or not, you're recognizing the volunteer for for wanting to promote and recruit more volunteers. Asking for a volunteer's opinion is a form of recognition. And some of you probably have special parking spaces reserved for that volunteer. And then if you look over at the formal side, which most of us are familiar with, certificates, plaques, you'd be surprised at the number of volunteers that are really not interested in that. They would rather, you get something else that's a little bit more customized to them. Just standing up and saying thanks. Years of service pins, dinners, public recognition, things like that. When you're doing your dinners of recognition, and I know that can get a little costly, we'll talk about that a little later, but think about a theme that you could use for your dinner. Maybe I've seen treasures in the sand, where the theme is flip-flops and Hawaiian shirts and things on the table or seashells, and sometimes it's just fun to break down that barrier of dressing up for a formal banquet of recognition and let them come and have some fun with, Hawaiian leis and things like that. Volunteers really like to dress up sometimes and do that. You may want to hear another good one is volunteers or gems, where you get some, inexpensive jewelry or beads or things you can decorate the place with. And another one that I have been part of is an agency did Shining Stars, and they coordinate their recognition dinner around the actual Academy Awards. And the volunteers walk down a red carpet, which you can get some inexpensive fabric to do that. So when they enter, the volunteer is treated like they just won the Academy Award. Very, very powerful to think about a theme when you're doing your formal banquets, to give everybody an opportunity to kind of have some fun with it. So just informal, formal, again, a lot of it depends on how much your budgets are, but we can do, shoestring budgets. And share these ideas with one another. I think it's a good idea to know your volunteers and why they volunteer. We know that some volunteers are there for the praise. They enjoy the recognition. Some volunteers, volunteer for affiliation reasons. They like being part of a club or a team. And then you have volunteers that they want to volunteer for the accomplishment of it. They want to check it off their list. They want to walk away and see what they've done. And then, of course, you have the volunteers who are volunteering for that power and influence appearance where, they want to show others, how to do things or how to make life easier. So those volunteers are kind of tricky when it comes to recognizing them and assigning them in roles in which they won't feel like they're, or perceived as being too bossy, so to say. So I hope you have a plan at your program where you can maybe identify a variety of informal ways to say thank you, the low budget ones, and then that you're at least doing some kind of a recognition event annually for your volunteers. And think about a theme. Think about doing something fun and changing it up. So, all right, let's do the next slide, please. So here's some recognition tips that we have come up over the years. We just kind of jotted them down as we come by them, but obviously it's important to make sure volunteers are doing work that's meaningful. There's nothing worse than, making up stuff, and I've witnessed that in my career working in volunteer management, and I just won't do it. And I emphasize that to my teammates here. I never want volunteers to be in our office or off-site where they're doing something that just doesn't make sense. I just don't like to make stuff up. I think it's rude. Invite volunteers to participate in decision-making. I had a FGCU student in here yesterday, and she was amazing. I gave her a task. Instead of me showing her how to do it, I said, would you come up with a way to teach this to another volunteer, and she was so excited. She went home. She's already emailed me this morning with this outline on how I wanted her to teach me how to make fleece blankets. Many of you have done that, where you cut the strips, you knot the blankets. This has become a real fabulous project to go kind of idea. And I didn't know how to make a blanket. I don't even know how to thread a needle. Well, come to find out, you don't have to. So this young lady, I don't know how many hours she spent on it last night. She's already made a couple blankets, taken photos of them, and sent them to me and said, I'm ready to teach. Let's go. So I'm excited to set up a project and let her be the leader and in that. And all right, so promote volunteers to other roles that take better advantage of their talents. Some of you may be using volunteer supervisors, leaders. I've always liked the word leader over supervisor any day, but when another volunteer can shine and teach others how to do what they do and nurture them, it just really really helps. All right, let's see what else we got. Oh, okay. Let volunteers know about the outcomes from the program. Here at one of the things we do here at United Way is we do some direct mail. We do have $9 million to raise, and we are happy that we completed that task this year for our agencies. One of the things we did was we had some young people helping us over winter break. They helped us with some envelopes, and when those envelopes started coming back in, the kids happened to be here, and we let them open the envelopes. And, you know, there were checks in those envelopes. So those kids really got to learn about how direct mail affects the whole giving circle and how what they did made sense. And then we taught them how the money, the campaign money, is being allocated to our agencies. And they actually got to hear from the agencies about how that money is going to help them. So, you know, we had a woman who made some thank you cards for us and attached lifesavers to them. And those cards went out to our local Publix associates on Publix Appreciation Day. And she called us and she said, I saw my cards. And what she was trying to say is she's liked our page on Facebook, and sure enough, those Publix pictures appeared, and some of the Publix associates were holding those cards. And she said, those are my cards. And we said, absolutely, those are your cards. So she was excited to see the efforts of her task. Let's see, ask volunteers for feedback, and I really like the last one. Recognition is everyone's responsibility. So no matter where you are and what position you have at your agency, make sure everybody knows it's their responsibility to do the recognition, not just you. All right, next slide, please. Give your recognition frequently. Give it a variety of methods. Give it honestly, sincerely, consistently. Again, these are just, you know, you should be able to take a pen or pencil and check these off and see if this is happening with your agency or program. A timely basis, recognize the person, not just the work. Give it appropriately to the achievement, and give it in an individualized fashion. So we always say praise in public and give constructive feedback privately. So again, this is a little checklist for you if you want to use it and see if it's happening at your organization. Set some new goals for the rest of 2017 on how we can get better. All right, next slide. Some volunteer recognition ideas. We have a few of these, and then I'd like to hear from you in a little bit on some of your ways in which you recognize volunteers. Somebody mentioned earlier about highlighting a volunteer on a social media post. I've been following a lot of agencies where, especially this month and this week for Volunteer Week, they've been highlighting volunteers in their organization. What a thrill for that volunteer to even be asked to do that. So again, it creates a volunteer opportunity for someone else to do this. You don't have to be the one writing it. You can have another volunteer do that. let's see, engage staff to send thank you notes to volunteers. We like to send around cards here in our department, and we ask for our staff to put their first name on it. A lot of times before we send that out, it's very helpful, you know, for me to get those signatures on those cards from my teammates. I hope you have found a new love for Pinterest. They have everything you need right there, as far as recognition ideas, how to make, you know, certain thank you cards, ideas, themes, fabulous quotes. I absolutely think it's amazing. And on this page, secure a proclamation from your governor or mayor to honor a special volunteer. At the end, we're going to show you some a couple of ways you can do that here in Florida. So next slide, please. All right, and then this page, and then we'll take some of your ideas. I see the chats are coming in, and I got my pen ready. Plan on holding a recognition event at least every year. I know for some of us it's hard to catch our snowbirds. We'd like to do it during volunteer month. Not always possible because of when they leave to go back north. Volunteers, we think, really like framed photographs. They like to see themselves. If they're an older volunteer, it's something they can show their grandkids. They can use that photo of themselves in so many ways. You can actually give that framed photograph to their spouse, or if it's a kid, to their parent, and surprise the volunteer by kind of going backwards and letting their family know how much you appreciate them. Work with the local media to highlight outstanding volunteer stories. That's just relationship building. We have people that are constantly asking us for stories about their volunteers. How about the last one, planting a tree in someone's memory? That's very special. We just had Earth Day, and we think about all here where there's so much building and construction, and so many, we just had all the fires down here as we're experiencing, unfortunately, throughout Florida. And we've lost a lot of stuff in our community. So sometimes just planting a tree in someone's memory on behalf of that volunteer, or a stepping stone of some sort, is really a great thing to do. Going back to that recognition event, have you ever thought about providing babysitting service during that event? Because sometimes volunteers can't come because of their responsibility to their own children, or they may be a caregiver for their own parents. So you just created another volunteer opportunity by doing such, is you can easily ask around in your community and say, hey, could you come be a babysitter for me for maybe an hour and a half, so that a volunteer could enjoy the event, knowing that their children are being watched. I guess something I picked up along the way was, we talk about stealing ideas from other people. Well, now it's your chance to flatter each other. So what I'd like to do, I see the chat box is filling up. I'd like to go ahead and hear from you now on some really cool recognition ideas that you have. Let's hear from you on what your suggestions are. Who wants to go first?
This is Audrey, and I can read a few from the chat box first.
Awesome.
We have Kristen from the Emerald Coast Science Center, who says that volunteers have like a reward system, and so after they get so many hours, they can kind of cash in for free tickets to their special events or for a free membership to their museum. Someone else mentioned that a lot of times local restaurants will donate free lunches to help recognize volunteers, and he mentioned that Sony's Barbecue is one of them. And then a lot of other people in the chat box talked about at the event making sure that you have the photos, like on a slideshow or whatnot, so they can kind of see the different volunteer opportunities throughout the year.
Well, I like the local restaurant one a lot, and that gives us another opportunity to thank that restaurant. That goes without saying, but it makes them want to give even more. I see a couple other people ringing in. What's your ideas?
Lori from Northwest Florida State College, her volunteers help create artificial oyster reefs, and so each volunteer gets assigned a shell that will be used for the reef.
Wow, very cool. Sign a shell. Good. What else?
Hi, this is Heather from Chapman Partnership. We do an annual volunteer luncheon every year. We actually just wrapped up ours last week, to where we honor one volunteer of the year from both of the facilities, both of our facilities, but then one volunteer who's an overall awesome volunteer. But aside from our volunteer appreciation luncheon, we've just started doing a newsletter, a volunteer newsletter, and we started doing a volunteer spotlight, to where we can highlight someone on a monthly basis to just talk about the activities that they've been helping out around the center, our longtime volunteers, or something special that we haven't done before.
Who writes that newsletter for you?
I do. The volunteer coordinator.
Awesome. What's your frequency, may I ask, in putting it out? Monthly?
It's monthly, so we just started it last month, or the beginning of this month, I'm sorry. So we're going to try to do it monthly and see what that response is there. If not, then we'll kind of cut down to quarterly.
Awesome. Many of you work with service learning students. We get them from Florida Gulf Coast University, and we actually use students to help us write things like that. They may or may not, we may or may not use them for publication, but the students need the feedback on their actual writings. So we're able to take that to our communications people and ask them to critique it. And then we have, in many cases, we're able to use that and give credit to the student for writing it. We also started doing interviews and collecting testimonies throughout the year. So we kind of have like stock photos, but we have stock testimonials, so that we can, every once in a while, we can pull out like the quote of the week from a volunteer and put it up on our social media, and that seems to be really effective when along with the newsletters. So awesome. Anybody else? Uh-oh. Good idea. I see a couple more coming in. Looks like testimonials on their Facebook page. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Well, as you think of them, let's go ahead and shout them up. Let's go ahead and go to the next page, Audrey. This is kind of something we like to. We came up with two. I think you have to click it again. Yeah. There you go. When's the best time to recognize a volunteer? When the volunteer signs up on the first day. I worked in juvenile justice for 18 years, and we used to tell students the first day they're admitted to our program is when their transition starts. Same thing with the volunteer. The day they walk in the door, the day they start, we should be recognizing them. And whenever it feels right. Those are the two most common times we think to recognize our volunteers. So, all right. Okay, let's move on to the next segment. We have a couple of, I chose 3 different types of awards that you might want to take a look at when recognizing your volunteers. One is the Daily Point of Light Award, which was started under President H.W. Bush's administration. These are easy to do. Some of you are writing in saying you honor your volunteers with a spotlight in the newsletter. Why not just take it a step further? And it's a very simple form to fill out. And each weekday, we're fortunate enough down here in Fort Myers to have had a couple people receive that Daily Point of Light Award. And it's very special. It's very meaningful. So You probably are familiar with it, but if not, I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Next one, please. Here we are, Volunteer Florida. Nominate a champion of service. I personally have had the opportunity to see these awards being presented. I look forward to the news briefings and the newsletter from Volunteer Florida, and we can really key in on these people and what they've done. I know it's probably a tough decision sometimes to narrow it down who gets the award, but what an honor to be recognized from Tallahassee, and so I encourage you to be submitting these. I think they're great. Next slide, please. Here's the President's Volunteer Service Award, another long-standing award. It's a best-kept secret. This is actually awards that can be given out to young kids, lifetime awards, family awards, and I can tell you that there are ways to find agent or businesses to support the financial cost of these. It's great to find a local insurance company, great to find a local business that will pay for these awards. They're not very expensive to begin with, but knowing that Target or Walmart or the XYZ bank will pay for them. So it's a great way to go out in the community and just say, will you get behind this? But I encourage you to take a look at the PVSA awards and to actually be a certifying organization so that other organizations can go through you to get those awards. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some barriers, because I know a lot of us are working on budgets, and aside from the money, what are some barriers that we encounter when it comes time to recognition? And if you want to chime in and say, how do you push through that? I'd be interested in hearing from you on how you do such. What are the barriers besides the dollars? Anybody? How about location? Do all of you live in a community where you can just have a place at your disposal to do this type of recognition? Do all of you have good weather?
I think that sometimes a barrier is the sheer number of volunteers. If you have a very small staff, but you have lots of volunteers, sometimes it can seem hard to want to recognize them all at the same time because it's extra work.
Wow.
And someone else in the chat box mentioned not enough staff to delegate the duties of putting the recognition event together. Yeah, a lot of people have had a small staff sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Those are good ones. I think for us, some of the barriers down here is, you know, like many cities, we're just spread out. Asking a volunteer sometimes to drive more than 30 minutes to get to the event is really asking a lot. The time of day isn't always effective. You can't get certain locations. The weather, I think, has a lot to do with it. If you're planning something out in the park and you don't have the ability to do contingency indoor. So I think there's a lot more barriers than we're aware of than the cost of actually doing the event. So I was glad to hear that somebody said about the small staff to actually make it happen. How many of you have a junior league in your community? They're very active in our community and do projects with us. They're getting ready to do one here in a couple weeks with us, and you know what? They do the whole thing. The woman power. the organization, the doing the certificates, getting the supplies, ordering them. So if you haven't tapped your local junior league, I highly recommend you reach out to them. Same thing with the Zontas. The Zonta clubs are real ambitious, hands-on kind of folks. So see if you can cross-pollinate with some of your service organizations. We're fortunate enough here to have 16 different Kiwanis clubs in our community, and they really, really enjoy working with us on literacy projects and hunger-related projects. And then you have the Army, that we call them the Army of Rotarians. They really know how to roll up their sleeves and get things done too. So think about your other service organizations in your community. Get out there and speak to them. Let them know how they can help besides just writing a check. You'd be surprised at how many are willing to offer. So any other barriers, any other ways that we can leverage those resources? All right, hearing none, let's go to the second last slide, Audrey. All right, here's a quote that might resonate with some of you. I thought this would be a great way to kind of summarize this all up. People want to feel what they do makes a difference. They want to feel it. Think of that word feel. They want to walk away feeling like they're on cloud nine. It's kind of all they need when it comes to recognition. Is feeling, is recognizing. They feel good about what they did. So don't forget that. And the last slide has my contact information on it. And I'm open for questions. I'll put a shameless plug in there for FAVRM, the Florida Association for Volunteer Resource Management. We have a new redesigned website. We're working on some other projects within that association. So please take a look at the website. Please consider coming to one of our forums, which the next one is in Orlando in August. That is posted up on our website. You'll be able to come join us, whether you're a member or not, and hopefully we'll see some of you there. But I'm open for some questions or just conversation if we want to start that process.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Really quick, I want to say thank you so much for putting a plug in for Volunteer Florida's Champion of Service. If any of you have questions on the right criteria, you can find it on our website, or you could reach out to me. And if you do submit something, please let me or your program manager know, and we'd be happy to send it on again to our external affairs. So again, thank you, Kim, for that plug.
No problem.
We do have a question through the chat box that says, what do you recommend for those of us with the small staff barriers?
Well, partnership, finding that service organization, as I mentioned, finding the service learning through local university or college. They're attempting to develop leaders in their community. Some of you may have, we have like through our chambers, we have, Lee County Association of Leaders. Through the chambers, they do the Leadership League. Reach out to them and see if they would like to help you put it together. You don't even have to ask them for funding necessarily, but the partnership in putting the event together. Hit up your targets. I didn't mean to say it in that manner. I apologize, but I have target people that just can't get enough of this, and they love to do this behind the scenes stuff. But really, your service organizations, your chambers, your junior league, your Zontas, look to those people to help form a committee. Your retired and senior volunteer program. Look to your senior corps companions. A lot of those volunteers are just looking for something else to do. Snowbirds are leaving. We have people calling us all the time saying, I'm not volunteering as much now that, it's summertime. How can I help you? So I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other final questions? I do have a few wrap-up things, but I wanted to see if there were any final questions for Kim. Okay, so I just want to say thank you so much, Kim, for the first webinar in the series. And so I'm not for sure if everyone is familiar with Kim, but she is a great resource here in Florida, and she's always willing to help. I can think of many Volunteer Florida staff that have reached out to her for help with training materials or icebreakers or whatnot. So again, thank you so much. And her information, again, will be included in the follow-up email that I do.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. If any of you live near Lee County, we do workshops here. You're more than welcome to attend. I know it's a drive for a lot of you, but if you probably live within an hour, I can guarantee it's worth the ride. We really pride ourselves on trying to be a network for people in this area who otherwise have no training resources.
Great. And so I just wanted to follow up with a few brief announcements. The next webinar is going to be Thursday, June 15th at 2 p.m. and it's going to be on the recruitment of volunteers. And so more information, again, will be emailed out similar to this past time. But if you have any ideas on what you would like to hear or potential speakers, please email them directly to me at audrey@volunteerflorida.org. And then the last slide pertains to the Volunteer Generation Fund grantees. And so if you're from AmeriCorps or RCAF, please disregard this. But again, I just want to do some final reminders that all financial invoices are due by the 15th of the month to the PER email. If you can't submit on time, you still need to email myself and the PER to let us know you'll be submitting late. Final budget revision requests must be received by June 1st, which is coming up. So if you have any questions on that, please let me know. With VGF, I do a midterm report, and so you'll be receiving that May 1st. And this is a snapshot of your grantee performance for the 16-17 VGF year, and it's going to cover all of your program and financial requirements. And then lastly is funding, because I've gotten a few questions about it for next grant cycle. Volunteer Florida anticipates another year of funding, and with the RFP being released late summer. Please look for a timeline for applications coming soon. So that is all that I have. Kat, did you have any final words?
Thank you so much, Audrey, and thank you, Kim, for all of the great expertise you had today. And everyone, we look forward to connecting with you on our next webinar. Thank you.
Great. Thank you guys, everybody. And again, this will be sent out electronically by the end of this week.